Searching for a romantic summer getaway? Escape with Rich Girl Summer, the new Audible original from Lily Chu. The exquisitely talented Philippa Sue, returning to narrate her 5th Lily Chu title. This time, Philippa is joined by her real-life husband, Stephen Pasquale. Set in Toronto's wealthy cottage country, aka the Hamptons of Canada, Rich Girl Summer follows the story of Valerie, a down-on-her-luck event planner posing as a socialite's long-lost daughter, while piecing together the secrets surrounding a mysterious family and falling deeper and deeper in love with the impossibly hard-to-read and infuriatingly handsome family assistant, Nico. Caught between pretending to belong and unexpectedly finding where she truly fits in, Valerie learns her summer is about to get far more complicated than she ever planned. She's in over her head and head over heels. Listen to Rich Girl Summer now on Audible. Go to audible.com/richgirlsummer.
If you live in the Chattanooga area, or even if you watch NewsChannel 9 from far away, you likely know our Chief Meteorologist, David Glenn. He grew up in this area. He's been our Chief Meteorologist here at NewsChannel 9 and Fox Chattanooga for about 19 years. But before that, he worked in Mobile, Alabama, and was there when Hurricane Katrina made landfall. In a few days, we'll mark 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. So today, on this special episode, I talked to David about his memories of covering Katrina. My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. Back in late August of 2005, you were in Mobile, Alabama.
That's right.
When Katrina made landfall. So let's just get into your memories of before Katrina. We all know what happened ultimately, but what do you remember about the days leading up?
Yeah, there's a range of emotions you go through. There's and also stress level. There's the emotional, the physical, and the mental.
Yeah,
that all go into that. But I'll back up for a second.
Yeah.
Have been here, you mentioned about 19 years, but before that I spent about 8 years on the Gulf Coast as Chief Meteorologist at WPMI, the NBC station that covers Pensacola, Mobile. We also covered Pascagoula all the way to Destin, so a large chunk of that northern part of the Gulf Coast. Now, prior to arriving there, I was here in Chattanooga. I worked at WRCB for several years, but when I got to Mobile, you got a Tennessee Valley kid on the coast.
Right.
And now you're Chief Met, and you now have to be the point guy to talk about tropical storms and hurricanes. Well, with the exception of what I learned in the classroom, I'm like, I better get immersed in this. And when I got to Mobile, that's the first thing I did.
Right.
I talked to my neighbors, talked to folks about, what was the most memorable storm in Mobile, which at that time, Hurricane Frederick, 79, is their benchmark storm. I talked to the great Dr. Bill Williams at the University of South Alabama. What are the storm impacts? It impact Mobile greatly. They impact Pensacola greatly. So I became immersed in all of that. Yeah. And I was fortunate that in the first few years I was there, we didn't have anything happen. That was good. It allowed me to kind of warm up a bit. I was there starting in 98. So I went to that season, 99, 2000. We had a couple of tropical storms come in, so I got my feet wet, so to speak. And then we had a very busy calendar year. Now, Katrina was at the end of that calendar year. We had 2004, where we had Hurricanes Ivan come through. Very devastating for Pensacola, for the Eastern Shore, and even in Mobile, the eye go right over Mobile Bay. That was the first real major hurricane that I was able to cover. But in that calendar year, we had Ivan, Major Hurricane Dennis, Hurricane Cindy, which was a strong tropical storm that later got upgraded to a hurricane, and then came Katrina. And that was at the end of that calendar year. I mean, you talk about storm fatigue by that point. You're like, oh no. But all those storms allow me to gain, the experience and be ready to go for these storms. And so when I talk about those range of emotions you go through, the mental part will eat at you before a storm. And
so this was your first Chief Meteorologist job as well. So the spotlight's kind of on you as well to make sure you're the leader of the team and doing all the things and getting everything right, all those things.
Exactly. And I had a great team. I had a great support staff. Our new staff was great. But along with me, our meteorology team was meteorologist Jim Losnica and meteorologist Kelly Foster. And Kelly's still there at WPMI. And it was great because she grew up in Pascagoula, right there on the Gulf Coast. She had her own personal experience with hurricanes. Jim Lostica, same way. He grew up in Florida, near Jacksonville. So he had a lot of information as well, a lot of experience. And so when we would trade shifts, when a hurricane would come in, I was confident that the team was covering things because we would get on these 12-hour shifts before a storm would strike.
Right.
And so you've got to go through the emotional part of getting your house ready.
Sure.
Getting the family evacuated, which for my family, this was the third time in a year. My wife, when she pulled out of the driveway, I will never forget. She goes,
right.
I'm getting tired of this.
Sure.
As everybody was. But it's hard seeing your kids leave. They evacuated to Fort Payne, close by here, where my in-laws lived. And then I was able to get my house ready. And I'm going to call out a great human being, Dudley Neese. One of my neighbors, good friend of mine, he would always come put up my storm shutters, put them up, take them down. He knew I was busy. He would call me, say, I'm going to come over and put your shutters up. And he did. Every single time we had a storm. So I was at ease. Because of Dudley's efforts, and now my family's evacuated, I can kind of relax then.
Right. You can focus on what you got to do.
That's right. I can fully focus, let insurance take care of the house, whatever happens. I can focus on my job. So I had a great team, great support staff at the station. But you start feeling anxious. There's a dread before the storms hit because everything from Hurricane Ivan still fresh in my mind. That happened during an overnight situation. And now Katrina is a daytime situation.
Right.
Katrina went from a Cat 2. It crossed over Florida, became a Cat 2 in the Eastern Gulf. And the Gulf waters were still kind of untapped, pretty warm for that time of year in late August. There's also something called the Gulf Loop Current, which is a circulation of the Gulf, which is just always there. Well, the storm happened to go through at the same time that loop current was nice and warm and became perfect for growth. Katrina went from a Saturday night to Sunday morning before it hit, from a Cat 2 to Cat 5 overnight.
Right.
Just exploded.
Yeah.
And now you're dealing with a Cat 5 bearing down on you.
Right.
And at that point, it's a very large storm. It's one that's going to, it's going to go in between the Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama Gulf Coast. There's still a little wiggle room. At that time, the hurricane cones were a little bit wider, so it covered a large area. So we were bracing for, this could be really, really bad.
Right.
And you're starting to see some of the messages come out of the National Weather Service in New Orleans about that. There I am the night before.
Yeah. So we have an audio audience and a video audience, but the video audience can see this is you. So Katrina was 20 years ago this August.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're really getting into this today. But yeah, what do you remember about that night and kind of the thinking about, okay, what do we got to do now?
Yeah, that is about 8, 9 o'clock. That's about 12 hours before landfall on the Mississippi coast, about 9 hours before it makes landfall on the outer islands of the Delta region in Louisiana. You can see a shine on my face. Our air conditioner is off because we're running on generator power.
Oh, good point.
I am sweating.
Sure.
And I remember it being very hot in there.
Yeah.
And so we're on generator power at that time. And this is when you're really talking to the audience that's still in Mobile. Many people have evacuated.
Sure.
There was no longer any storm amnesia from previous storms. There's now storm fatigue. So people got out of town.
Yeah. And here we are. This is the footage when it starts to come into landfall.
Yeah. This is the next morning. That would be the Monday morning on the 29th, I believe.
Look at the floods.
And you can see that's near Water Street in Mobile.
Okay.
Peak storm surge 12 feet, which is getting up to the street lights, getting up to the traffic lights. And it was very common for Mobile Bay to lap up there on Water Street in Mobile. That's appropriately named. But that was about the peak storm surge we got from that. So a large part of downtown is underwater at that point. Parts of the eastern shore are getting hit hard as well because the storm surge, everything's coming from the south. There was also, you see the causeway there. I'm not sure if we had the video or not, but there's an oil rig that lost its mooring that got stuck up under a bridge. I mean, it's just loose. It's a drift, and the storm surge pushes it in. That shows you the volume of the water that you're dealing with there. So you got to deal with the wind aspect inland, but people on the coastline got to deal with the water.
Make this distinction, because when we talk about Katrina in the country, most of the time we think about New Orleans. Make the distinction between Mobile and New Orleans for us.
Okay. The storm center went into coastal Mississippi. So Mobile's going to be on the east side of the storm, which is really the dangerous part of the storm, where that big storm surge comes in. New Orleans was on the western eye wall. Still, really bad with the wind.
Yep.
And you could see, initially the reports out of New Orleans were, and I've got several newspaper headlines which show this, on how it evolved more. For the most part, the Central Business District, the French Quarter, New Orleans, came through okay. Now, I mean, there's wind damage.
Sure.
We know the Superdome had part of the roof. It was leaking, but everyone inside was okay. A lot of windows out in some of the high rises, but by and large, it's okay. That's the first initial report you heard. But here's the problem. When that storm came in the way it did, it's coming in from the south. Mm-hmm. Well, the counterclockwise circulation is pushing that water from the Gulf into Lake Bourne area. Okay, and that sits just north of New Orleans. This is that crescent, so they got a lot of levees to be there to support all the water coming in.
Right.
It's pushing water into Lake Bourne. As the storm moves north, then the north wind comes in and pushes that water into New Orleans, swells the tributaries, and puts pressure on those levees.
Right.
So at first, the first reports out of New Orleans were, most of the cameras are situated in the French Quarter, Central Business District, and they're like, well, we're okay. And I've got a headline that says, well, New Orleans still stands in real small but widespread flooding. It wasn't really till during that day we started getting more reports that there's a levee breach. Don't know how bad, but there's a levee breach. And it really wasn't until the next day, after the storms went inland, that the video started coming in.
Sure.
Then you see the scope of it.
Yep. Here's the Mobile newspaper headlines here as well.
Right, you see it at the top. And then as it progresses each day,
Yep.
the narrative gets worse. And it's all, here it is.
Likely
Katrina's
thousands.
toll,
Yeah.
no mercy, chaos. And it's because this is all, the New Orleans story is unfolding.
Right.
Because unlike in Mobile, where we had these storm surge flooding, which is destructive enough.
Right.
The water moves in, the water moves out. The levee, water's stuck.
Nowhere to go.
Pumped out.
Right.
It's just rising. These people on the rooftops. It's a terrible, chaotic situation there.
And those papers are in audio, the audio audience can't see that, but 80 feared dead. I believe that was the first, the Tuesday, and this is Wednesday, no mercy, and then by the next one, which is Thursday, likely thousands. Katrina's toll, likely thousands, and then the next day, despair, chaos. It's getting worse and worse day by the day. And this is the Mobile paper here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really, when you talk about the storm surge itself, it hammered coastal Mississippi.
Sure.
That was ground zero of the worst damage. You go from Biloxi to Pascagoula, past Christiane. That got hammered by a massive storm surge. There was a high water mark when Camille came through in 69.
Right.
That was their benchmark storm. But then when Katrina came in, what was different was Camille was a smaller storm. A lot of wind. It did a lot of wind damage in Biloxi, but it was a smaller storm. Katrina, not as much wind. It was actually weakening on landfall, but it was a massive storm surge.
Yeah.
It pushed water well past the high water mark of Camille and on to about I-10. So there are a lot of people that may have stayed thinking, well, I'm north of the Camille watermark. I'll be okay.
Right.
And they weren't.
Yeah.
It went far inland, a lot of saltwater intrusion, one or two of those marshes there. And the casinos there took a big hit in Biloxi. Here's I've got some of the pictures of the video. You can see some of the destruction there. The buildings in Biloxi, the physical buildings are the hotels. The casinos that are there, they're on the water.
Yeah.
They're known as the boats. People would always say, I'm going to go gambling on the boats in Biloxi this weekend. Well, all of those were pushed across the highway.
Right.
When I went there about a week after the landfall, you saw these massive barges these casinos are on tossed.
Yeah.
The Hard Rock Casino was set to open that day Katrina struck.
Oh, is that right?
Largely it was okay, but the superstructure was compromised. They had to basically start over again.
Yeah, the last clip here, if you can hear me in the booth back there, I think doesn't have a name, I think it's just number 6. So this is Biloxi.
That's
here. Biloxi.
Biloxi.
So you were in Biloxi. When would this be?
It's
here?
about 10 days after, a little over a week after.
This is the looting and all these things. So you can see on the front of that, on the front of that house, it says something about you loot or something like that. So people are coming in and taking stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and all of this is not from wind. That is from storm surge. The building that you can see, that's from storm surge.
Interesting.
Not just the wind. And a lot of the trees no longer have leaves. They have saltwater intrusion. They're done.
Right.
So, and that's how high the water got.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget a story. As we were covering the storm, There was a story that morning, and I can't remember if it was our crew or one of the other crews from Mobile, but there's a gentleman who's in his home in and around the Biloxi area. He and his wife were treated to the attic because the water was rising so fast. Right. And their house is now moving in the water. They're holding hands. House splits. They let go. He can't find her. He survives. I don't think she did. And the despair in his voice, it's 20 years later, when I think about it, I don't want to hear it because it was so desperate and hard to hear. Yeah. And you feel guilty that once the storm's over, at our house, we got some shingles missing and we don't have power for 3 days, but that's just cosmetic.
Right.
This guy lost everything.
Right.
Lost his whole, everything he had.
And so a lot of stories like that through the whole area.
And that's region. Where, when that narrative from New Orleans began to come out with the flooding, we live near Mobile Regional Airport, which is near also the Coast Guard Aviation Training Center. Josh, they were flying missions before the wind stopped. Back, forth. The sound of the rotors for days. Sure. They were flying rescue missions all toward New Orleans. And people from Biloxi, New Orleans were migrating our way. Mobile, we were able to get back up on our feet, except for the coastal areas. But by and large, our infrastructure was okay and power's coming back. But I'm going to look on their faces coming to the rescue areas. These are people that just lost everything, but they were migrating to us. We were the beacon there to get to for food and water and getting power back restored.
And we saw that up in this area.
We did.
People who you can still meet today say, I came here after Katrina because my business was gone, my home was gone. And I was in Knoxville at the time. I remember the convention center there. They, put out cots and the whole thing and brought buses, loads of people in who just had nowhere to go.
That's right. And many people have still stayed. They've come here, they've stayed, and I get it because I think they think, I don't want to go through that again. Right. I certainly wouldn't. I understand that. But the interesting thing about New Orleans is, if those levees don't break, for the most part, they, like that first headline said, New Orleans mostly spared.
Right.
As long as the levees don't break there. But the storm that brought the most destruction, that's still sort of that benchmark to a lot of people, is Hurricane Betsy in the mid-'60s. Mm-hmm. That's where the eastern eye wall went right over New Orleans. Right. And it caused a lot more wind damage with the storm surge. And that's what a lot of people remember. And by 2005, now you're dealing with, 40 years removed, there was a lot of storm, what they call storm amnesia. Mm-hmm. You tend to forget what a storm can do. And so some people may not have evacuated because of that. But now they've, seen a levee breach, I think more and more people now, they don't take the chance. Once the storm's coming, they're out. You're talking about a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. You talk about storm amnesia. So here we are 20 years after.
Yeah.
What has changed in the years since? What are the things that you think about as far as, maybe lessons learned or maybe lessons forgotten as well?
Yeah. We've seen several storms on the Gulf Coast since that time. Mm-hmm. And I think the evacuation measures are a whole lot better. I think people do take it seriously. Yep. But as time goes by and you don't get one, you get that amnesia setting back in. You also get storm fatigue from having too many storms all at once. But I'll say this. In 2005, the Hurricane Center was utilizing and really stressing the use of that forecast cone everyone's familiar with. Sure. That cone that comes in shows where it's going to strike. That all started around 2002. Just so people would not focus on the straight line of a storm when you talk about a forecast. Because, as I mentioned, when you're dealing with the eastern and western eye wall of the storm, it has wide-reaching effects from a storm surge and wind field. But now, 20 years later, that cone that was very wide, it's narrowed. Forecasts have gotten so much better. Yep. Utilization of AI now and forecast models and more real-time data that the models can now compute faster. Just from last year to this year, the forecast cone is 3 to 4% smaller.
Interesting.
And compared to 20 years ago, it's almost 20 to 25% smaller. Yeah. It's a more narrow swath. So you take out the cry wolf syndrome. Because a lot of people say, I evacuated one time, that cone was over me, I don't do it now. Well, now, as forecasts get better and better and better, and we get the Hurricane Hunter data going into the models, you're going to find that being narrowed even more. And so I think with Helene, we saw really well how that one was set up well, and there was an early warning with the coastline. And I think as we go through the peak of this season into September and season to follow, I think the utilization of AI, which is very important in weather. We utilize computer models quite often, but now you do it faster, and now you can put in there historic data. It can understand it better. It's going to get better in the years to come. We're not there yet, but you're going to see that cone get narrower and narrower.
That's interesting because it feels like that where we are today. I mean, obviously, you have days where like, oh, I didn't know it was going to rain at this point or whatever.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
again, over time, it has gotten more. It's gotten improved as far as how accurate you can be. But you're right. I think AI, these other technologies, make that even more pinpoint.
Yeah, I embrace it because I'm really looking forward to it. It doesn't have all the historical data yet.
Sure.
There's a lot of just 30-year sets of data. And so as that starts to expand, it's going to get better. I've been in this business 34 years. I can tell you when I first started, when you got data 3 hours old, that's new data. If you told me I have 3 hours old data now, I'm like, throw that out. I gotta have it. We gotta have it now. We're used to that now.
Right.
We're used to having phones in our hand, instant data.
Yeah.
But that's how fast the computers are doing it now. And even here locally, as you mentioned, with thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, it's going to get better in the years ahead as far as getting that early warning faster.
Sure.
And again, on the coastlines with hurricanes, it's going to get even better.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Helene, and obviously a big part of that from this region was flooding. We had a flooding incident here just a few days ago.
Absolutely.
And those kinds of things that do happen that, I think it's just devastate. Just a neighborhood, an entire region, entire area that they're still, years later still trying to navigate, clean up, fix, recover.
Exactly. And that's some things models can't show. And going back to the flash flooding event we had earlier, models indicated whether it could be a 1 to 3 inch amount on already saturated soil. So we were kind of urging, be aware slow moving storms could cause flooding. Yeah. Did any of the models project 6 inches, 7? No, of course not. But you have to, meteorologically speaking, you got to be aware of that. Yeah. But as now that data goes into historical data, maybe as time goes on, those forecasts will get even better as well. Yeah. So I'm very excited on what it's going to do in the meteorological field. I don't think it's going to replace the humans, but it will help us out, especially when it comes down to for storms and storm warnings. You'll see those polygons that we show for tornado warnings. They're going to get smaller and smaller as we get better data coming in. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about? Anything else on your mind?
Well, I will say this. I'm glad to be back in the Tennessee Valley. I still look toward the coastline when there are storms. I think it was a great experience to be down there.
Sure.
But I'm a Tennessee Valley kid at heart, and I'm glad to be back. And it was a time that I'll never forget. I'm proud of our team's efforts during that storm for Katrina, on how we had to navigate through that and the wealth of information we gained from that. And I'll always, carry that with me. But I'm a history buff and a weather buff, and I think it's very important to talk about these storms. If we don't talk about these and share our experiences, they'll be largely forgotten. So archiving on a format like this is very important.
I'm certain that it made you a better meteorologist, better forecaster going through that experience of living down there, especially like you said, the rapid pace of it.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And to talk about when you're simulcasting on radio, because as people are losing power, they're no longer watching you on television. Most are now listening to you on the radio. And I'll say this about the day Katrina hit. Our TV station's generator caught on fire.
Oh my gosh.
We lost power. So we all had to go during the height of the storm, drive to the radio building to continue our simulcast. It was okay because most people were listening to us on the simulcast anyway, but to spend about 30 minutes driving through the peak of that storm in Mobile as that eastern eye wall, effects are coming in, that wasn't fun. Yeah. But we were parked there for about 15 hours or so.
And it here, the big storm here, you're here for hours on end. I'm sure you're sleeping in the station at least, a period of time. How long till you got to go back home?
It was about a 15, 18 hour time frame. I finally was able to go home about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning after the storm
Got you.
went
so
away.
You had to go home that day.
It was more like that night after.
Right.
But there was no power, Josh, and you don't realize how important streetlights are. So you're driving home.
Oh my gosh,
There's not a street light on, there's not a neon sign on, there's nothing.
And you have no idea what you're about to see.
Yes.
Because it's dark
there's
and there's been
debris in the road.
Right.
Yes, and you're navigating around it. There's police officers they would be lenient on us media people.
Sure.
But they would let us come on through checkpoints. But what would normally be a 3-mile, 15-minute drive home, it was an hour.
Right.
Because is this my street? No. Is this my street? No. I'm thinking, where am I? You can't see
how
beyond your
different
headlights.
things are when
Yes.
yeah. And in the dark versus when there's street lights, those kind of things.
Yeah. So those are things, and then you go without power for 4 or 5 days afterward, and you're thankful to have some air conditioning. I got to where I lived at the station after that, because once our generator power came back, we had air conditioning, so I slept there until I got power back at my house. It was too hot. Yeah. Way too hot. It's interesting to look back 20 years later.
Yeah, it's a good conversation, and I think even having this conversation, just remembering the time, and I was, like I said, in Knoxville at the time, but understanding it from that perspective is interesting.
Yeah, and I'll say this: we saw the worst a storm can bring to humanity.
Yeah.
What I saw on those days after, the folks in Mobile and how they regrouped and rallied and helped those people in Mississippi and Louisiana as they migrated over, I saw the best in humanity. The worst storm ever, but the best in humanity, people taking care of other people.
That's your house right there, the difference between before the shutters and after the shutters. I think that's before.
That's right before, and there it is. They're all covered up.
It's interesting that you say that, and we see that time and time again when chips are down, when we go through hard times. That's when we see people really step up and show who they are.
Rally together. Yeah. They do, and we've seen that here in the Tennessee Valley.
And we saw, at the same time, it's kind of like, we saw looters, we saw people doing awful things, but at the same time, you also saw people doing amazing things.
Yeah, from those Coast Guard helicopters I mentioned,
sure,
nonstop, 24/7, to the volunteers on boats, anyone who's helping people get out.
They're putting their safety at danger.
They are, and there are resources there to get people. I was just blown away by that and amazed, and it still sticks with me, and it reminds me of how good people are and helping people out in their most dire situations. Yeah.
All right, thank you, David. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Josh, for having me.
Yeah. A big thank you to my friend David Glenn for this conversation on Morrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of News Channel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join me again real soon.